to the Clemson Dubcast. It is Tuesday, February 25th. The start of spring football practice just 3 days away. And so far this week at TigerIllustrated.com, we have explored the new addition of Kevin Kelly, the scouting maestro that Dabo Swinney pulled from the Chargers. And also today, Cade Klubnik. It's a whole new world for him this spring compared to last spring when there was so much uncertainty about him. Also, easy to forget the Trent Pierman sensation coming out of spring practice last season. So we have a deeper look at Cade Klubnik as this team, this offense and this team as a whole, it really seems like it's his now. So this podcast has been going since August of 2018 and has 769,000 downloads of 339 episodes. And my great friends, Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold at Parham Smith Archenhold Law Firm, have been a part of it for every single one. They are longtime Clemson people, and they give you the experience and the results you need. Their team can help with personal injury and medical malpractice cases. They currently serve North Carolina and South Carolina with offices in Greenville, Spartanburg, and Charleston. If you or your family has been injured, I want you to help you get the compensation you deserve. Schedule a free consultation by calling 864-301-8767 or by going to parhamlaw.com. That's PARHAM law.com. Listen up, Clemson Tiger fans. Founders Federal Credit Union has a new office right on campus in the Hendricks Center. We're here to serve you with the financial tools you need and the personalized service you deserve. Not on campus, Founders has an office conveniently located on Old Greenville Highway. Stop by or visit foundersfcu.com to learn more and apply for a membership. Relax, you're with Founders. Federally insured by NCUA. Membership qualification required. Celero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Celero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Celero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Celero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Celero at celerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. All right, so last week we had on Valerie Bauerlein to dig into her spectacular book, The Devil at His Elbow, Alex Murdaugh and the Fall of a Southern Dynasty. And probably the biggest centerpiece in that book, aside from Murdaugh himself, was Mark Tinsley, who's known as a hero for both his absolute destroying of the defense on the stand in the Murdaugh trial and his willingness to take on Murdaugh in the Mallory Beach lawsuit that came after the tragic boat accident in the boat that was driven by Paul Murdaugh, Alex's son. Anyway, you got to get the book because when you do, you're going to gain a whole new appreciation of Mark Tinsley and his role in this whole thing. Okay, here we go. Enjoy. Okay, very pleased to be joined by Mark Tinsley. How you doing, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yes, had Valerie Bauerlein on last week to talk about her masterpiece of a book on the fall of the Murdaugh dynasty, and your name came up quite a bit in the conversation, and it came up quite a bit in the book as well. I guess, first of all, did you know you were going to be such a focal point of her book?
Well, not exactly. I mean, I knew I was going to be a focal point because I had a lot to do with a lot of the things that happened in the unraveling, but no, I didn't, and I agree with you. I think the book was great. It would be the movie that we all wanted to see, at least the people who know the entire story, because it's just so complicated. But she did a really good job. Yeah,
and can you maybe give your ballpark of? I mean, clearly, she spent a crap ton of time interviewing you for your story that went way beyond just your involvement in the trial, and also, of course, the Mallory Beach wrongful death lawsuit. It went to your I guess hobby is probably not a strong enough word. Your passion for hunting and traveling across the world and being up near 1,000 miles north of Calgary, like up near the Arctic Circle Like, just
in the
amazing.
Arctic Circle at times, yeah.
Absolutely amazing. I'm just curious, because I have a journalism background. I've written a few books, and I'm always fascinated by process. And I didn't really interview her. I didn't really ask her about the process of zeroing in on you, not just as a figure related to Murdaugh, but also just really fleshing out your personality, which involved a lot of that backstory of hunting and all that.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I think at times she was fleshing out the backstory when I wasn't necessarily cognizant of her fleshing out the backstory. But, you know, it sort of happened in waves. We have, what I mean by that is you have the boat crash that gets a lot of attention, and there's a lot of media focus on that, and then the murders occur, and then you have this watershed moment where the financial crimes begin to come out. And so, you know, at different points in time, there's a lot of attention to, and a lot of reporters or authors are clamoring for information. And in the beginning, I think she came in and she wrote an article, and then shortly after that, she was really writing an article about Greg Parker. And it's my understanding that Greg Parker had saddled up to somebody very high up in the Wall Street Journal, and said, you really need to come down here and look at these inequities in South Carolina. And so I knew she was interested in this whole dynamic between Greg Parker and this case and the Murdaughs and my involvement in just trying to do what I thought was the right thing all the way through. And so I gave her a lot of information and shared a lot of information in terms of what was going on, which I thought led to a great article in the Wall Street Journal about Greg Parker's involvement and the things that were happening within the lawsuit. But yeah, I mean, we didn't talk in detail about where this piece of information is going. She was just a vacuum and absorbing all the information and really did a masterful job. I mean, there were probably 4 people that had a complete handle on the facts, and I think Valerie was one of them.
Who were the other 3?
Me, Tabor Vox, and then probably Liz Farrell.
Okay. What was the second? You said, I'm sorry, the second name you mentioned?
Tabor Vox.
Okay, I'm not familiar. I apologize.
Tabor's a lawyer in Bluffton in Beaufort County, and Tabor, because originally I filed the lawsuit, the boat crash case, in Beaufort County, and so Tabor, you know, it's a different world today than it was in 2019. I mean, the boat crash, the anniversary of the boat crash was yesterday, 6 years. But I knew that there was lots of law enforcement involvement in helping, trying to cover it up. And so Tabor had strong connections and knew lots of people in law enforcement. And so many times it's not who you know, it's in terms of helping you, it's who you can identify to make sure they're not hurting you. And so Tabor was involved early on, and his sort of inside information on some of who the players were was instrumental in at various times.
And then Liz Farrell is another media type.
Yeah, she was, I don't remember if it was the Island Packet or Beaufort Gazette, but that's where she started when the boat crash was. And then she went to work at the Beaufort County Sheriff's Department as the public information officer, and then ultimately made the move she was at Fitz News for a little while, and now she's just partnered with Andy Matney on their podcast.
There was so much in the book, in Valerie's book, that as somebody who has a reporting background, I'm like, holy crap, how did she get this? And then all the legwork that it took on a lot of the historical stuff with the generational power going back, I guess, a century and more. But how much do you think that Valerie's respect for the subject matter and for being fair and for getting it right separated her, because as you mentioned, there are armies of media trying to get stuff. But my conclusion is, or hunch is, that to get information, you have to cultivate trust and respect on the part of sources and various people who do know what's going on. So how much of a role do you think that played, her honoring of the subject matter, I guess is maybe the best way I can put it, putting herself in position to get stuff that nobody else got?
Well, I think that was the key. I mean, I can remember something Dick Harpootlian said, and I felt like I needed to respond to the comments. So I went and ABC News Tonight, I think it was, and there was a producer there, and she asked me some question that clearly demonstrated she didn't know anything. And when you are being interviewed, people are trying to get information from you, and they don't understand the subject or the players. And, if you saw my desk, I've got a pile of stuff. I've got work to do. And so me helping you understand the minutia, which you need to understand to see the big picture here, I don't have time nor the inclination to do it. But so the people who really took time to get into the weeds, to understand how all these things were interconnected and related, yeah, they got more because they understood more, and they didn't miss those little pieces. And I think she certainly did her homework, and it helped. No, it helped. I mean, you knew you could trust somebody who cared enough to do the work to figure it out, and then find newspaper articles from 1946 about a fight between two people over some cows and things like that. It was pretty amazing.
So when you were reading the book, how much were you like, oh, wow, I didn't know that? Like, what did it tell you that you did not already know?
Nothing.
Okay.
And that was the unique position that I was in. Now, I mean, you and I see the same thing. You and I may have a different opinion or perspective on what we saw. And so there are little nuanced things that I've said, I don't know about this, or I don't know about that, or maybe someone's take on something or might be different than mine. But no, I mean, the problem with this case was it was like drinking from a fire hose, and I had to know everything. I had to know the boat crash. I had to know, all the cases that came before, and all of the financial cases and the victims, and I just had to know all those things. And so there really wasn't a whole lot of new information for me. And I think she did a spectacular job in telling it in an understandable, digestible format.
I guess it
was great. And that,
yeah.
My favorite one, just jumped to my favorite part into the end, was the ending. I really appreciated how she ends the book focused on the people whose lives were impacted by this trauma, whatever that trauma may be, whether it's the boat crash or whether it's the financial loss or, the loss to them personally that were suffered in the wreck or whatever catastrophe had impacted their lives. But the ending with the victims and the focus on the victims and I just thought was a nice way to end the book.
I guess what I asked you, if there was anything you learned in the book, I probably should have clarified some of the history that she really dug into, like the fence around an entire county, Hampton County, way back when, and just all the roots of it. I get you already had a pretty good historical knowledge of that family and its sort of generational power.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Anderson originally. And I moved down here in the beginning of 2000. So I've been here a good little while, and you hear things, you hear stories, and so I was familiar with what was fact and what was fiction. Didn't really know, and sometimes the story might have been more interesting or embellished over time, but there were stories that were told over and over the years, and by enough people who I believed would have known, and some of those made them into the book, and so I think that they probably are more likely to be true than not, and probably are true. but she still found things. I mean, they did an incredible job, really sort of sifting through history and went way back, way back. I don't think all that stuff made it into the book, but it was interesting.
Something I'd love to learn more about is I guess your relationship with the Murdaughs. It was chronicled in the book, and also you've shared in other interviews that at one time y'all's social lives were intertwined, and you invited Alec and is it okay? It's spelled Alex, but I guess we need to call him Alec. Does it matter?
I guess. I don't think it matters.
Okay. I'm just going to say how it's pronounced.
Alec was,
or how it's spelled.
No, for the longest time, I was confused when I first moved here because I thought it should start with an E, and then I would see it written as Alex, and I couldn't figure out why everybody was saying Alec. But yeah.
But you invited you invited him and his sons to fish on your boat at Edisto and help Paul. I mean, you still have a picture, I think, of a picture of you and Paul with a fish he's reeled in. I'm just curious. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I meant you want to say something.
My old hacked Facebook account still has a picture. I don't have it anymore. But no, I mean, I had a house that was not too far from his at Edisto, and I mean, I knew Paul primarily as a young boy. I remember Alec calling Paul baby, and he's 10, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, somewhere around in there. I don't really have a whole lot of involvement with the family after that. But yeah, I mean, I knew him, and Alec and I basically did the same sort of work. We were in adjoining counties, and we probably competed for the same kinds of work. And from time to time, we helped each other in cases. And at the time when this comes along, I questioned whether or not I could do it. I mean, because like I said before, it's a different world. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what all the twists and turns, and no one could have known what was going to happen here. But I thought that I was peculiarly suited to help this family, and somebody needed to help them and work through it. And so didn't take long to see what was happening with the boat crash investigation and what wasn't happening and who was involved. And so I started helping them. They wanted help, and I felt like I could do it. And once I agreed to do it, I was going to do it. And which means I'm going to do everything I think I need to do. And that's what I did. There are not many things I'd go back and change about the way that the moves that I made and the things that I did.
Can you maybe enlighten on, before you took the case, was it a period of years where, as was detailed in the book, that you just had noticed his tactics and his behavior, and it says you didn't trust him and you even disliked him? Can you maybe elaborate on sort of the chronology of that growing sort of, I don't know.
I don't cynicism? Think. Yeah. Alec was always Alec. But it was, from where I sat, it was a fake sort of approach. And I don't mind somebody being fake as much as I mind your thinking that I'm not smart enough to see through this fakeness. And that's the thing. I didn't dislike Alec. I recognized Alec for what I thought he was. And I heard somebody say, we thought he was Robin Hood. We didn't know he was Al Capone. And I think there's some truth to that. I mean, I think we compartmentalize, Alec did this favor for me, or Alec helped my mama with that, or whatever it may be. And so he's a good person. And so you overlook things, and you don't understand the bigger picture and see all the things that are going on and really have a complete understanding of just who Alec is or was, is. But, yeah, I mean, we were friends. We were friendly. I didn't have any ill will towards Alec. I thought that when I got involved in the boat crash case, that Alec recognized what people who understand how these things go. I mean, it's a civil case. I mean, we can disagree over the right and the wrong of different aspects of it. But at the end of the day, if you're knowledgeable about the way this process goes and the way this is perceived and how people will respond to the things that happened, you reach a resolution. And I thought that was what was going to happen, but I didn't realize Alec was so egotistical, is not strong enough, that he's so narcissistic that he thought he was above everything, and that he would be able to bully his way and not be responsible and not have Paul be responsible, and he was wrong. And I think ultimately he realized that the tide had turned and he didn't have the power, and he knew he was wrong, and there was going to be a reckoning.
I guess as an entry to setting up you taking the boat case, in the book, Valerie wrote, Alex was slippery. Tinsley had seen the proof. He loathed Alex's good old boy routine, the way he was always working an angle. He suspected Alex had fixed a jury in a medical malpractice case Tinsley had tried in Hampton. At another trial, Alex had suggested to Tinsley that they plant a microphone in the jury room. Tinsley had laughed until he realized that Alex was not joking. Tinsley saw Alex traveling on private planes, buying up land, picking up the check at fancy group dinners. Alex was loud and loose in a crowd, a wizard at reading a room. One time he had watched Alex weeping during a closing argument in front of a jury, holding his face in his hand. When he sat back down at the plaintiff's table, Alex had leaned backward over the rail and turned to Tinsley with a grin, saying, "Hey, Bo, you don't think that was too much, do you?"
Yep, that's true. It was the first case tried in the Allendale County Courthouse after the courthouse had been burned. And I was going to tell that story when I was on the stand, and Judge Newman wouldn't allow me to tell it because it had been so many years. So I probably shouldn't have given so many details because it's exactly what he did.
And then it said also you suspected him of straight out, of boxing you out of $1 million fee in a case both of y'all were involved in.
So that was a case that he represented everybody that was involved in the wreck, and it's one of the financial victims, the family I currently represent against Alec and Palmetto State Bank and Russell Lafitte. But yeah, what happened in that case was UPS was the defendant, and UPS came to me. They wanted to get me involved in the case, and they offered $1 million to get involved, and I ended up not doing it. And in hindsight, I should have, but I didn't. And that was just, at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. And part of that was, I don't know what's going to happen. And, and I don't know if this will make sense, but I'm going to bring it back to this boat crash case. If you come in, and I'm notoriously a plaintiff's lawyer, and I represent people who've been injured, and we go to trial in Allendale, and what happens if Alec gets a large verdict against UPS in this case? Everything flows downhill, and so when the result is bad, the people aren't happy. Well, there's only a few people to blame, and the first one is the lawyer. And so what I had proposed was that I would get involved on a sort of a reverse contingency. In other words, what I save you from his last demand is the only way you're going to trust me in terms of the result. I mean, I'm not promising you a positive result, but whatever I save you, you pay me a percentage of that. And ultimately, they didn't want to do that, so they offered me a flat fee of $1 million. And part of it in turning it down was, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's not worth, money's great, and people are in business for money, but I don't know what's going to happen, and I didn't know what the result was going to be. And so it wasn't going to be worth me accepting $1 million and them thinking that somehow they had bought anything other than what they bought, which would have been my endeavor to do my best, which may or may not have carried the day. So that was part of it. The other part of it was, that's just not typically what we do. I mean, we represent people who've been injured, and we don't necessarily represent companies who have injured people through, gross negligence kinds of claims.
As Valerie is given the context at the point of the timeline of the Beach is asking you to take the case, she writes, Tinsley already knew Alex Murdaugh well and had been involved with him on many cases. At one point, Tinsley had considered Alex a friend, but they were no longer close. Why were y'all no longer close? Was that just kind of an organic thing, or? It was a combination of things. It was
Alec only called you when Alec wanted something. And so, it's a purely a one-way relationship with Alec, or friendship with Alec. And I wouldn't say we were friends as in, we're good buddies and we do things together. Although, there were times that we did things together. We socialized occasionally, Alex just wasn't the kind of person that I necessarily relate to. I believe in helping people you care about and doing good things and trying to do your best. But Alec was only about Alec. And so we were still friendly. I would have done what I could do to help if I thought that was the thing to do. But no, we didn't socialize. We hadn't socialized for years. And although we'd still be friendly, and if he saw me, it would be, hey, good buddy, and shake and, grab you and put one hand on your shoulder and shaking you and holding on to your hand just like he did everybody. He had a knack for making people think that they were his best friend. I just knew I wasn't with him.
At the point before you decided to take the case, what do you think? And this might be a stupid question. What did you surmise he thought that you thought of him?
I think ultimately, I don't know that. So if I understand your question is sort of at that point, but I think ultimately, I think he thought that it was, if you watched Ronnie Crosby's testimony, I can't remember which case it is, whether it's in Russell Lafitte's or in Alex trial, it's this idea of this friendly lawsuit that he was much like in the Satterfield case, that was his housekeeper, where he's a very willing defendant and somehow that he's going to help me mainly against Greg Parker and his company, and that we're going to appreciate that and lay down and then not go after Alec personally. I think that's what he thought. Now, whether it was because I was intimidated, because it was, I don't know necessarily the why he thought that, but it became clear eventually that's what he thought. And he wasn't happy with that. A lot of people weren't happy with that.
And you had people warn you, like, hey man, you better turn back before it's too late. And you said, you don't know me very well, according to the book.
Yeah. Take it easy. Why are you going after him? I mean, one of the lawyers from one of the boat crash victims I remember him calling me on the phone. I can't believe you're going to go after Alec personally. And you know, I mean, there's so many times that the appearance of things may be worse than what it really is. And there wasn't a world in which I could not make Alec pay personally that anybody, I don't really care about everybody, but that anybody would have understood that. And the only real people that I cared about in that scenario, in this case, were my clients. And they certainly didn't. They wanted Alec to be responsible because from where they sat, I mean, all these people knew each other before the boat crash. They grew up together. So from where they sat, Alec had never been responsible for anything in his life. And they didn't want it to happen to somebody else's kid. And this was a train wreck coming for a long time with Paul.
Yeah. And I know that when I was watching the Netflix documentary or series or whatever it's called, I think before that I was just sort of casually following the case, but when it really grabbed me was the part where they relayed that the night or the morning after the boat crash that some of the other parents were like, well, we need to call the Beaches, the parents. And I don't know if it was a DNR agent, I don't know who it was, allegedly said, "Oh, we don't need to make things more complicated, or we don't need to bother them with that."
Yeah.
And I think I hit pause and I looked at my wife. I mean, we're the parents of 2 high school age girls. I'm like, this cannot be true. You know, it's just disgust and you're almost enraged. Was that sort of the preferential treatment that was relayed to you in the aftermath of the scene, including Randolph being waved through the police tape to go look at the scene while the mother, Renee, wasn't allowed to go farther than the police tape? Was that where it really...
That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, it was Randolph, Alec's father, and the Maggie, Alec's wife, that were waved under the tape and went down to where the boat crash had occurred. I mean, that was certainly it. You know, when the murders occurred, there was a lot of focus on all of it. And the point that you're making now it was something that I focused on, and I was struck by, but not as much as I was to hear Philip and Renee Beach talk about it. And, you know, because it's one thing, my view of how insensitive and how callous and how indifferent that is, and it's a whole nother to realize how that callousness, that indifference to the worst thing that can happen to a human being in their life, bar none, is the loss of their child. We're not equipped. It's not the ordinary, the natural order of things. We generally can't process it, and we really can't get past it. And there's a lot of guilt that goes along. What if I had made her come home? What if I had not bought him this car? What if I had kept him at home? You know, but that's just what we do as people. We what if it to death because we're supposed to protect our children. And I heard Philip Beach say, and it still makes me emotional. I think he said it to Eva Pilgrim right after the murders, because Jim Griffin had made some comment that obviously they were keeping the boat crash case open because it had something to do with the murders, and the family was incensed by that. And so we decided at that point we were going to give an interview, and so he told Eva Pilgrim, he said, you know, they didn't even show her the decency that they would have shown an animal on the side of the road. Mm. And it was powerful, and broke my heart. Because, you know, in Philip's mind, and I don't think he's right, but in Philip's mind, if I'd known, I could have been there. I could have saved my baby. And they didn't give him the opportunity to be there to try. And that regret is something that haunts him to this day. Because we think that we can do it, right?
Sure.
What if I had been there? And, it was terrible.
So what are Alex's father and Maggie doing? Like, what was their purpose? Like, I mean, obviously, I guess you can only speculate, but in their minds, what are they doing as they go beyond the police tape?
When they contended Paul wasn't the driver, I'm not sure.
Going to look at the scene? I mean,
yeah. So the way the bridge is, there's sort of a access road that goes down to the base of the bridge, and so the vehicles could pull down there, and that's where the boat was, the base of the bridge. So the boat crash happens. The boat first strikes what they call a dolphin head, which are these pilings that are lashed together, and I think that they're designed to keep debris from the tides from collecting on the bridge and putting a lot of pressure on the bridge. And so they strike the dolphin head, and the boat immediately turns 90 degrees to the right, and then they strike the bridge, and it goes on up on the rocks when we think she came out and struck her head when it hit the dolphin head, and then the boat goes on up the rocks at the base of the bridge, and Mallory was ejected out into the water. So that's where the boat was at the time.
Yeah. A big part of your task initially was working with DNR, sort of taking them to task to get the DNR officers who were compromised off the case in short order. And the night of the accident, there were 20 some odd cars there, and it just, I think in your words, suddenly all these body cams just aren't working anymore or weren't turned on. Can I have maybe your recreation of just sort of the missteps or the willful?
Well, it wasn't a misstep now.
That was the wrong word. Sorry.
No, I mean, it clearly wasn't a misstep. So if you get stopped this afternoon, the officer's going to walk up to the car and says, "Sir, do you know why I stopped you?" He's not doing that because he doesn't know. He's doing that because he's recording you, and you're going to say, I was on the phone with this lawyer. He talked forever, and he couldn't answer a question directly, and so I was in a hurry to get home, and I'm sorry I was speeding. They know that. And then any DUI, they know that they have to video the site, video the suspect, and you have to be able to demonstrate that the person was impaired. And so what do? You get them in front of the camera and you do field sobriety tests, or you get them in front of the camera and you just video them. And there's not one single video of Paul from all of the cars that were there and the people that were wearing body cameras. And there's a dash cam video where you can see one officer clearly is videoing Anthony Cook, which was Mallory's boyfriend, who's recounting, who goes after Paul. I mean, you hear it on the Netflix documentary where he screams at him and he hopes he rots in jail. And I mean, they have a fight there and on the bridge. And so, he's really going after Paul because Paul killed his girlfriend. He uses those words, and that goes away. So I spent an inordinate amount of time listening, watching every single video from every single car before I found the video. It's really the audio. So these officers would have microphones on their body, and they're sort of limited in range, and so it has to be in direct sight and then out a certain distance. So if they were down at the base of the bridge, it wouldn't pick up what they were saying, but if you came back up and you were near the car, it would pick it up. So, I found the audio where drunken Paul asked the deputy in charge, can he use his phone? And that officer says, well, you dropped your phone over there on the ground. And another officer confirms that they picked it up. And, that's the only evidence that we had from the scene that Paul was drunk. And that's just not the way investigations are done. I mean, they know that whether they they're going to be the agency in charge of the boat crash investigation or not. They know that their job is to preserve the evidence, and they have to do that. And that wasn't done. And the people that were involved in that, I mean, if you hear an officer say, "I've got his phone," he's taken his clothes off. We could see from Luther's bar. So they start at the river house, the Murdaugh River house. They go by boat to an oyster roast. They leave the oyster roast, and they just sort of casually putt is their word, back to this bar, and Paul and Connor Cook go and have 2 shots, and then they start headed back to the river house. And as the crow flies from the bar to the bridge, I'd be shocked if it's 2 miles. It's not very far, straight line, but it takes them an hour. And most of the time, about 80% of that time, the boat's not going fast at all because they're arguing, or it's, and it's Paul arguing because now he's really drunk and he's angry, and so his clothes are off and his wallet with his brother's ID in the wallet, and there's lots of evidence that's not collected, and that ID becomes significant because it was a replacement ID that was procured by his brother for the purpose of allowing Paul to buy alcohol, and we sued him for that, Buster for that. But there were lots of things that we had to unravel in terms of how that was handled, and ultimately, that handling, DNR's involvement, the disappearance of DNA, the audio recording of Anthony Cook saying Paul killed my girlfriend, and there was other items of evidence, processing of photos of the boat when they collected the DNA. Those were gone. Those things weren't in evidence. That's what started the state grand jury investigation that ultimately led to subpoenas being issued to Palmetto State Bank, Russell Lafitte. And I can only imagine what Russell did the minute he got the subpoena for all of Alec's financial records in early 2021. Would have picked up the phone and called Alec. And Alec testified he knew they were looking at it.
Are these DNR agents, do you think, that night, or they just do this stuff instinctively? Or is there somebody who is calling the shots? Like, I'm just trying to...
Oh, so the guy, you help me understand. The guy in charge for DNR, according to DNR, is removed at the end of the first day due to his conflict of interest with the family. But who do you think is the supervisor who signs the official report for DNR on the accident report, the boat crash report? It's the same officer.
Same guy?
The same guy. And on that report, it has these boxes, and it says for the causes, and check all that apply. And one of those is alcohol. It says check all that apply. He doesn't indicate alcohol had anything to do with causing the crash. It was excessive speed and failing to maintain a proper lookout. Doesn't even indicate. So I mean, what do you think Dick Harpootlian's going to do with that in the criminal trial? I mean, I can hear him right now. DNR did not even believe that alcohol had anything to do with it. They don't have any evidence of this or that. And, the same things he did in the murder trial.
Another drop the remote moment during the next Netflix series was when they say John Marvin is allowed to tow away the boat, the evidence. How do you explain it?
So there's a record where he meets one of the young officers. It's the same DNR officer, Pritchard, who was in the video in the emergency room. So Pritchard was the one that was trying to interview the kids when Alex and his father stopped it. And I think it's his record that indicates that John Marvin brought the trailer to the boat ramp so that the boat could be removed. And so he's there at the time. I don't know that it says that John Marvin towed the boat. I just think he was there. And, back to the Paul's wallet and the phone that are not recovered. They're not in evidence. And we know for a fact that Paul used the duplicate ID that night. We know it. I mean, he and his girlfriend went to Columbia and they got it. And there's this Snapchat video where they use it that night, and the girlfriend saw the ID, and we know what the picture was. And when I deposed Buster, guess where the duplicate ID was? In his wallet.
Upstate foodies, want to take a moment to talk to you about our favorite taco spot, Willie Taco. 5 locations across the upstate. This award-winning team has been serving up fresh taco fusion for a solid decade now. The chefs at Willie Taco utilize the freshest, most creative, and sometimes unexpected ingredients in their kitchens. Come see why Southern Living, Garden and Gun, and Food and Wine Magazine are raving about Willie Taco and their signature offerings, such as their Southern Tide, crispy avocado, Nashville hot chicken tacos, literally flavors you will not find anywhere else, folks. And don't forget about the cocktails. Super fresh margaritas, ice cold cerveza, and over 80 tequilas served up daily from behind the bar. So don't wait, folks. Your Willie Taco Familia is ready to serve you up their twist on funky, fresh fusion. It's the Willie way. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archambault. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. When do you think Alex realized that, this is not going to be a friendly lawsuit? Was it basically when you start taking on the task of weeding out the DNR officers who had a conflict, or maybe after that? Or
I think it's somewhere in that time. So that's like October of 20. And coming into October, I ultimately learned that I have stage 4 prostate cancer, and John Tiller, John Tiller was the mentor of our friend Adam, and and just a tremendous human being. But John Tiller also, he was dying of cancer, and we knew that was going to happen. And so we were pushing, John Tiller and I were pushing to try to conclude the case. And so I knew I was going to be gone for a period of time having my treatment. And one of the things that happened right after the boat crash was I went and captured all of the social media content of Maggie where she would have liked photos of Paul with alcohol, whether it's at Wofford at Buster's graduation with his granddaddy, or on the beach, or on the sandbar. Just all of it. And, Alec wasn't the only one that owned that boat. Maggie owned it too. And Maggie provided Paul with the credit card. It was in her name, so the statement came to her, and you could see the alcohol purchases on the credit card transactions. And I knew Maggie was upset by the lawsuit, and I knew that I thought Alec would want to protect her from being named. And so somewhere October, November of 20, I send what's called request to admit. So, we can, if you're the defendant and I'm the plaintiff, and I can ask you to admit certain facts is true, admit that it was daylight, so we don't have to bring someone in to testify, whatever. So I asked them to admit that all of this information that they knew, and it was all imputed to Alec, and they end up in November, December, they deny it, which really means I have to sue Maggie. And so, to me, I've always taken that as sort of a point in time when Alec told Maggie's sister that whoever did this, talking about the murders, been planning it for a long time. I think that's about when Alex made up his mind what he's going to do, sometime in November, December of 20. He doesn't know how he's going to do it yet, but he knows he's going to do it.
Can you please recreate the scene at the Trial Lawyers Association gathering in Hilton Head? Paint the picture of Alex flexing on you, I guess, or trying to intimidate you.
Well, he's a big guy, and he saw me, and my recollection, and then even talking with lawyers who were there in the room who saw it, is that everybody sort of parted, and Alex saw me, and he come straight across, and interestingly, I think Judge Newman was in that room, and I didn't really realize that Judge Newman had paid attention to Alec at the convention until he sentenced Alec in the state financial case, and he commented on seeing him and how he was acting, and so, but I remember a number of people being in there, and Alec sees me, and he comes straight across, and he wants to know what's this he's been hearing about the fact that I'm telling John Tiller he's going to have to pay personally, that I'm not accepting his help or his policy insurance, that they want to pound the flesh, and he's going to have to pay. And that's when I told him he needed to settle the case, because I was going to do everything I needed to do. But I don't think he believed it then. Because that would have been in the summer of 19. The boat crash was in February, and so that would have been August of 2019. I didn't go in I think that's right. I didn't go after that for a while. I certainly didn't go the year of the murders in 21.
Is that where you told him you'd burn his house down?
Yeah. I can. If you don't think I can burn your house down, you're sorely mistaken.
Wow. Yeah.
What
was it that Judge Newman told him in reference to that gathering during the what you alluded to earlier?
My recollection is it had to do with just how he was carrying on. There's a point where Judge Newman tells him, "I think you're an enigma even to yourself," and he remembered watching him and seeing him and just sort of holding court and laughing. I remember receiving text and videos of Alec at the bar, at the resort, laughing and cutting up and having a great time. This is right after the murders. Right after the murders. The murders are in June. This is the 1st of August, and he's just having a ball. And I can't imagine. I didn't go, and it wasn't even my family that was murdered. Now, the truth is, I was also having cancer treatment, so that was part of it, but I wasn't going to go anyway.
The tiger on the tail line from Judge Newman, some folks sort of at a surface level might look at that as, boy, that's such a vindication for you and make you feel 10 foot tall. But I think I've heard in other interviews that it was even upsetting for you because it basically says, yeah, this is the in your mind, the conclusion was, yeah, me being on his tail is the reason that Maggie and Paul are no longer alive. Can you maybe just share just the enormous conflict of emotions that had to bring?
Oh yeah. So when I first testified, I'm only testifying to the judge before he decides whether all this stuff's coming in. And I think Creighton Waters is walking me through my background, and I said, I went to USC Law School, but I wore an orange backpack when I was there, going to Clemson. And so, in the instant when he said "a tiger on your tail," like Mark Tinsley. I thought for a moment, I thought that's what he meant. And I tried a case in front of Judge Newman up in Fairfield County years earlier, and it was a sad case, and I got a good result for my clients. And he was really talking about the relentlessness of my approach, and that, that you talked about going sheep hunting and in these mountains. It's a lot like handling this case. Every single step is the only thing I'm focused on is the next 6 inches, and everything's too heavy, it's too high, it's too far, it's too wet, it's too cold, it's too hot, it's too everything, and you don't want to be doing it, and it's uncomfortable. And I appreciate that experience and pushing myself. Now, I'm not saying I'd like to do the whole thing with elk Murdaugh over again, because I certainly wouldn't. But that's what he meant. And so, that's at the tail end of hearing him say what I thought, and I still believe is probably the most powerful address that I've ever heard given in person, ever, anywhere, bar none. I mean, he said the things to Alec that I think everybody thought, and nobody's breathing in the room, and as he goes through this. And so, I got up and I sort of immediately make my way back into his chambers, and I thanked him for what he said. And then I did get emotional, because when you do what I do, we're pushing the people, whether it's the consequence of what could happen if we ultimately are in front of a jury, whether it's you don't want me to know how much money you make, or whatever it is. I don't know. I mean, if there's a string that you don't want pulled and I see it, that's what I'm going to do to try to push you to get the best result that I can. It's just sort of the way it works. And so I was pushing him, and I know I was pushing him, and I didn't really care about his financial information. I mean, the truth is, but he didn't want me to have it. And the fact that he didn't want me to have it was the reason, that I definitely wanted it, because he didn't want to give it up. And, you can't very well say I'm broke when I know that he's not broke. He can't be broke. He's actively making money. But I went back, and I sort of joked with Judge Newman. I said, Judge, I tried a case in front of you. You weren't near as good as you were in this case. But he, I told him, I said, I feel responsible for my role in this. And I mean, and he comforted me, and I appreciated that moment very much. And he's just a tremendous human being. And I still do. I mean, I still feel like there are parts of, you couldn't anticipate what he's going to do, what Alec's going to do, but in terms of making it uncomfortable, where this is the way out, this is the only way. That was one of the reasons that I felt like I needed to so zealously advocate for Paul and Maggie, because from where I sat, I didn't see anybody else doing it. And, and I told Buster that in the hallway in the Colleton courthouse. I'm here for your mama, and I'm here for Paul. And he nodded and thanked me, and I didn't see him make any gestures towards me, but it was. I appreciated that, the judge's wisdom in terms of what my responsibility was, and how I wasn't to fault for those things. But it doesn't make sense to. I hope most people. The rationale of a sociopath, but I think that there were a couple of things that were happening. I mean, it wasn't insignificant that his father was about to die, because the death of his father, which had been a long time coming, would have instantly put him in the position of, victim is not the right word, but where people would have naturally been sympathetic to where he was. And so that forthcoming, that event that was coming, and we knew it was coming. Everybody knew it was coming. It was going to happen. It was an opportunity, and I think he thought that he was going to get by with the law firm like he'd gotten by before, and he would tell him something else or get some money moved around, and that would be covered. But we had a hearing in front of a judge who had indicated that he wasn't buying into the nonsense, and that was coming on Thursday. His daddy was about to die, and so, it's hard for me to fathom that I would solicit my spouse to come to Moselle so we could go see my dying father, who's going to die any time now, and then we don't even go see him.
Mm-hmm.
And Alec riding around shooting guns with Paul, I don't think that's something that he did a lot. He might ride around, but to ride around in target practice, that's just not something that he did. And personally, I believe that probably was cover in case they do a gunshot residue test on his hands, and so he could say, "Yeah, we shot pistols earlier." I don't think he had help. I don't think Alec was the kind of person who would allow anyone to get that kind of information on him. But he definitely used people, and yeah, I don't know if I should say anything more about that. But
one other thing, Judge Newman had also just lost a son unexpectedly, I believe, right?
Yeah, right before. And I mean, when I first took the stand, I told him I'd been praying for him, and yeah, I can't imagine. In the juxtaposition of where he was and his loss, and the helplessness of his situation, to lose his son like that, really in the prime of his life, and then here's somebody who doesn't even care about his son. His son's merely a pawn for him to be able to keep all his money and and have the tide turn so that people are now sympathetic towards him, and yeah, it's just terrible.
How big of a Clemson fan are you, and did you really wear an orange backpack at law school in Columbia?
Absolutely wore an orange backpack at Columbia. My daughter's a junior there now, and I am sorry to say that for most of my legal career, I haven't gone to any Clemson games because I just simply didn't have time. But this year, I think I went to 3 this year, which was a lot. So it's been 30 years since I've been to one, and then all of a sudden I'm back at, and but I've always kept up with it. I am a big Clemson fan. I don't. The orange backpack part may be a little overstatement of how seriously I take it. I don't. I appreciate it. I enjoy it when they win. I don't enjoy it when they lose, but I do appreciate it. And so,
Mark, how did this change your life? The profile, just all the notoriety. I think I heard in another interview you were at an Elvis impersonator concert in Franklin, Tennessee, and at intermission, a bunch of people are lining up to take selfies with you.
Yeah. I mean, I had that happen. Yeah, I get recognized a lot, and it certainly changed it in that perspective. But I think it changed my life, really for the better, not for those reasons, but just because it helped me focus on really what matters. I mean, when you have cancer, you have stage 4 cancer, it really puts things into perspective. And so going through that at the same time that I'm dealing with all of this, I remember, I don't know how old I was, probably in high school, there was some book, I didn't read it, but it was a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, there's so many times in life we get all wrought up in these little things that at the end of the day don't really matter. And my daughter's room wasn't clean enough to suit me. She left her plate of food on the table, or whatever it may be.
You're describing my daughters right now. Sorry.
Yeah. Well.
Sorry.
But I mean, I think that the thing that I got most was in watching the beaches, helping them through what they've gone through, and the people they are, and I've said it before, not because of what happened to them, but who they are in spite of what happened to them. And it made me want to be a better person. It made me focus on things like, underage drinking and the hazards. It's a $20 billion a year industry. And companies are intentionally turning a blind eye to these fake online Chinese IDs that underage kids are using to buy alcohol, and they want to claim they're tricked. Or the truth is there's technology. I mean, in Clemson right now, there's a pilot program where they're utilizing scanning technology. I mean, I think that if we can make the world a better place, a safer place, we ought to do so. And so I'm focusing more on things like that now. And I want to be a better person. I want to do good things. I want to be remembered for something other than Alec Murdaugh.
One more thing about Alec. You said having known him and been around him and been friends with him, you knew there were these little tells in his mannerisms that indicated when he was trying to pull one over. What were some examples of that?
Well, Alec had an incredible ability to remember who you are, who your mama is, what's going on in your life, something. So if he saw you, he made you think that he was genuinely interested in. But almost as soon as he would ask you whatever it was, he moved on to the ask for Alec. And so that's one of the things. And so it was always constantly on his phone. And so the ask would come, whatever it is, and almost immediately says, hey, Bo, I got to go. Can I call you right back? And you can finish whatever it was that you were telling. And he never called back. I guess that sort of thing. But you could just tell. I mean, I could just tell being around him. There were things that you knew he was full of it. You knew he wasn't going to do the work. He always relied on somebody to do the heavy lifting in terms of the legal maneuvering. But I can't imagine living that life that he led. At the end of the day, there were just so many lies and keeping up with it. And it was always robbing from Peter and paying Paul and 6 balls in the air he's juggling. And I just can't imagine living that way day in, day out. And I know he didn't do it on drugs because you couldn't have.
What about when he was on the stand? Some tells. I mean, obviously, I don't think there were any tears. It seemed like he would always start, quote unquote, breaking down when they talked about the scene, I think.
Yeah, the first, I'm being a little hyperbolic, the first 5 minutes are a train wreck. It's not going well for him. He comes off as fake to me. But eventually, he's got a lifetime of speaking to people, in front of people. And I felt like eventually he got his feet under him and he started to become persuasive in whatever it was. But if you really sort of examine, he wasn't concerned about me or Jeannie Seckinger from the law firm in terms of what we were looking at or but he was concerned if he passed a police car in the road, he would become paranoid about that. Things that just didn't make any sense. Right. And there was eventually a fair amount of anxiety over, his performance and whether his performance was going to work. Because he didn't have to win all of them. He just had to get one of them.
So where's the money? If the drugs were overblown and...
I told Jim Griffin when Alec was sentenced in Beaufort to the financial crimes, I said, Jim, I sure wish I had heard those jailhouse calls and Alec trying to get Buster to go to that deer feeder at Moselle, because I would have gone to Moselle and checked that deer feeder had I heard those. I said, I hope you went. And he looked at me, and that was just kind of kidding. But I think a lot of the money went to fuel this spending habit that he had. I don't think that he was a drug dealer. If he was the worst drug dealer in the history of the world, because usually drug dealers get caught because they've got so much money they're spending it. They've got to have some place to put it. So I don't think he was dealing drugs. I think that some of it could be in something called captive insurance, where it's in some offshore account. I think there were some indications. I know the FBI was looking at and trying to find the money. I don't know that the state's looking as much as the feds were looking, but I think that that's what was left of it. But he spent a lot of it. At any given time, he owed the bank millions and millions of dollars, and they were happy to give him more money. But he spent a lot.
You've given me a lot more time than I asked for, so do you have a time for one more question?
Sure.
What's the most dangerous situation you've been in, or the scaredest you've been on one of your hunting trips? These are all solo, correct?
They're solo in the sense that it's just me hunting, but you can't go in Canada or in Alaska. You can't do these hunts without a guide, because they are dangerous. And I was hunting in, it was a good friend of mine, Forge. You know who Forge is. Forge Consulting was the annuity broker which is one of the ways Alec stole some of the money. But there was one of the founders of Forge, was a good friend of mine who was in the Army. And Charlie Shelley died in a plane crash with his wife, I think in 2020. That might be 21. Anyway, he told me that he had done some high mountain training in Alaska. And he told me about how they trained if you were in an avalanche. And I thought that was the craziest thing I ever heard. And I remember him telling me about this training and what you're supposed to do. And I thought, it was sort of mind-boggling to me. I mean, avalanche is something you see in a movie, but it doesn't really happen, does it? And so I was hunting in northern British Columbia, and I hear this noise that sounds like a bird's wings, and I look up, and there's a boulder about the size of a basketball, and it's coming straight at me, and almost straight above me, and I know it's going to hit the ground before it hits me, and I don't know whether when it hits, is it going to veer a little bit to the left or to the right, so I don't know which way to dive. And ultimately, I think I just don't. I mean, if it hits me, it kills me, and if it doesn't kill me, then I die in the fall. And what happened is that in late October, you don't have a whole lot of daylight, and on these northern facing slopes, they don't get a whole lot of sun, and that's where we were. And so you have a huge frost heave from the night, from the freeze, and then the little bit of sun gets on there, and it dislodges some rocks, and then the stuff begins to fall. And so this big rock goes by, and then immediately behind that, there's a pretty good sized avalanche. And I can't move. I can't get out. We're really in a chute because it's so steep, and this is where this debris falls. And I just laid down, and I remembered what Charlie told me, and I covered up my head, and it was terrifying. I was lucky. I think I got hit on the arm by a rock about the size of a baseball, which would have hit me in the head. But that's probably the scariest thing that I've been through. I fell in what year? 2022. I fell in the the Northwest Territories. I fell about 25 feet backwards like a nesty plunge, broke my middle finger, landed on my backpack. And I remember I was on a big rock and it moved. And when it moved, I lost my balance and my feet got tangled and I went backwards. And I just remember thinking, I got to stop rolling. I need to stop myself rolling. And it was like being in a washing machine or a dryer and just tumbling. And then I stuck the landing. But really what happened was I hit on my backpack and my feet flipped over and I stopped. I just free fell about 25 feet. And that wasn't as scary during, because it was a blink of an eye and it was over. The rock slide was much scarier. But yeah, it's a scary, it can be a dangerous place.
Well, Mark, I cannot thank you enough for your time. I know it's valuable, and congratulations on all the kudos you get. I mean, much deserved, and thank you for your helping the Beach family.
Go Tigers.
And your contribution to justice, too.
Yeah, we all have it in us. I mean, we just all have to be tigers in our lives at different points in time and just do what's right and not stop. Just put one foot in front of the other. What they say about eating an elephant, how do you do it? It's just one bite at a time. So that's sort of the way I approach things.
Just like with Valerie, I asked for 30 minutes. And also, just like with Valerie, I got a lot more. So can't thank both of those good folks enough for their time. In a story that just really kind of gets more and more compelling. Again, I highly encourage you to get the book. It is such an important tool in tying so much of this together and telling the history of it. And you'll learn a lot more about Mark's hunting expeditions that we touched on during the interview. Greatly appreciate our sponsors for continuing to help make this happen. And thanks to every single one of you for listening. Appreciate it. Cheers.